Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so happy to have Emily Iland as my guest today. Emily is an award-winning author, advocate, filmmaker, researcher, and leader in the autism field. As the mother of a young man with autism spectrum disorder, she brings personal experience and insight to her professional roles. She has worked as a professional advocate and is an adjunct professor in the Department of Special Education at California State University, Northridge, where she received her master's degree. As a consultant, Emily provides program development, curriculum development, and training for parents, organizations, and government agencies about many topics related to autism spectrum disorder and related conditions. Main areas of focus include safety in police encounters, transition to adulthood, and parent education and advocacy. Emily has created 2 groundbreaking safety programs, Experience Autism and Be Safe, the movie. Experience Autism teaches police officers how to interact with people with autism or intellectual and developmental disabilities, and is the only evidence-based police training in the country. Be Safe, the movie, uses video modeling to teach teens or adults with disabilities how to interact safely with the police. Emily and her son, Tom Iland, have co-authored the award-winning book, Come to Life, Your Guide to Self-Discovery, which is intended as an ideal tool for transition planning. Emily and Tom also offer engaging trainings on Come to Life, Experience Autism, and Be Safe, which are in demand across the country. Welcome, Emily, and thank you so much for joining me today to discuss transition from high school into college and beyond.
Thank you so much for having me, Gilda. It's a pleasure.
And I understand that you have some really wonderful news that you just found out about for you and for Tom.
Yes, we're going to be going to the United Nations for World Autism Awareness Day on April 2nd, and Tom is going to be on a panel of self-advocates to discuss how to use assistive technology in the process of transition and independent living.
That is fabulous. That is absolutely awesome. Bravo and kudos to you both. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what happens afterwards. You'll have to give me a call and let me know.
Yeah, it's going to be live streamed around the world simultaneously, and it's just a moment for people to have a voice. A lot of people will be there who use devices to speak, but Tom can speak, but he wants to talk about the ways that assistive technology can help people who can speak too, because sometimes that's overlooked.
Well, that's wonderful, especially people who do have other challenges that very often go unnamed or undetected. For example, people with selective mutism, who might be able to speak under certain circumstances, but under other circumstances, for example, in school or in public or whatever, it's a challenge for them. And so these assistive technologies can definitely be useful for people like that and people with other speaking challenges as well.
Yes, I think there's so many options. It's an untapped resource that has such great potential that I think we're not taking advantage of enough. So it's nice to shine the light on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, to get down to the subject matter that we want to discuss today, there are more children with autism now than ever before, at least more that are reported now than ever before, and they're growing up, they're becoming adults. How are they doing as adults? How are they doing when they go through this transition process from high school into college or employment or beyond?
Well, we finally have a fact-based answer to that question, because in 2015, the Drexel Institute came out with the first National Autism Indicators Report, where they analyzed government data to give us answers to the question of how is it going for adults on the spectrum once they leave school. And I have to tell you, it's not good news. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it's a wake-up call. The things that they've discovered is a wake-up call to all of us, whether we're parents or educators or therapists, that we need to start doing things differently because the outcomes aren't good. And the way to change the outcomes is to go back into the transition process and improve it there. That's really my belief. is, if we keep doing things the way we're doing them, we're going to continue to get these outcomes that I'll describe in a second. And to change the outcomes, we have to step back and say, where should we be shifting our attention? Where should we be focusing to do better for people who have wonderful potential and deserve a better life than they're getting?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's Einstein's definition of insanity, isn't it? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results?
Right. So you need to know what the results are so that you're alarmed and outraged by them to make you decide to do something different. That's really what I believe.
Yes. So then please go ahead and give us some examples or explain your take on how we do change these things to get better outcomes and what the results are that we're seeing and how we can do things differently beforehand when these young people begin going through the transition process to give them a better start into adulthood and into life.
Well, one of the things that's going on is that people are having a services cliff once they leave high school. So maybe they have services in place in high school like an aide, an assistant, or they have therapies for speech or pragmatic social skills, or they have different services that are helping them be successful the place they are. But when they leave high school, those services drop off, and it's called the services cliff, and they have a steep drop-off in services. So what that tells us is that our planning is not seamless, because a transition plan is supposed to keep you whole as you move out of high school and into adult life. You're supposed to have the same things you had in high school, something to do, somewhere to go, people to be with. And what we're seeing instead is that doesn't get all arranged in the transition plan, and then the person is at home sitting on the sofa with nothing to do. So that's called the services cliff, and we know it's happening, and it's a symptom of flaws in transition planning. So that's really important to know about, because people had nothing to do for years before people got their act together and are like, well, who can help us? Where can they go? What can they do? That should have all been figured out in the transition plan. So that's the services cliff. In the area of love and relationships, 5 out of 10 people in the data that was analyzed didn't talk on the phone or get invited to a social event in a year. So they said, in the past year, have you talked on the phone with friends? No. Have you gone anywhere or gone to a social event? No. 5 out of 10 had no social
50%.
contact.
That's horrible.
50%. That's a lonely life. That's unacceptable. So that shows their social isolation. 24% felt socially isolated. 39% didn't see a single friend in a year. And 32% had no community participation. In other words, they didn't do volunteer work, they didn't go out for lessons, they didn't go to classes. Imagine not having friends, not getting invited, and not going anywhere that you don't need an invitation for. So this is the social isolation that we're seeing. So doesn't that make you think, wow, I don't want that for my child, I don't want that for my students. What do we need to do differently?
Well, what can we do as parents, as advocates, and also on the educational and administrative level? What can we, as parents and advocates, encourage them to do for our children to avoid this happening when they get to that cliff?
Well, here's what I think, just speaking frankly, is what we know about social inclusion is that if you don't have friends leaving high school, you're not going to have friends after high school. So high school is the opportunity for real friendships, lasting friendships to form. But the problem is we've been doing geographical and physical inclusion of students with disabilities, but the social inclusion isn't necessarily happening. So in other words, they're integrated physically, but not socially. These friendships aren't forming all by themselves. And even some buddy programs, they don't last outside of school. They're called context-based. I'm only your friend if it's lunchtime and we're in our buddy program. It's not, lasting outside. So we have to go back and look at what's happening with friendships in the school and That's my opinion. I was involved with the Yes I Can program for social inclusion, which is a year-long program for people to get to know each other and discover what they have in common. And I think that gen ed students thinking they don't have anything in common with people with disabilities is one of the biggest obstacles. So ways to bring them together around their mutual passions is what friendship is all about, and that can be a lasting thing. So that's just one idea that I have on how to change that.
Well, what about as parents and advocates, when they're in high school and when this transition is being planned and being talked about, what can we insist upon from the educators, from the administration? What are good things to ask for to make sure that they are included in the transition plan for our kids that will take them beyond and into that next step? And what resources do you recommend other than just the transition plan and putting things into that transition plan, and also getting the transition plan probably started sooner rather than later once the child gets into high school? But what other resources should we be looking to and finding out more about while our child is in high school to prepare them for that next step?
Well, I'm actually writing a book to answer that question, because it's a huge question, isn't it? And the answers are not that straightforward. So Tom and I wrote a book, Come to Life, Your Guide to Self-Discovery, which is him talking to his peers to help them through this process. But I'm writing a book for my peers, teachers and educators, to answer these kinds of questions, because Tom's 35, so I have a lot of experience with this, plus I worked for 300 families when I was an advocate. And every parent has these questions, and the answers aren't easy to find. But one answer is, as an advocate, everything in the transition program is based on two things. One is the goal for after school. So if the goal for after school is to have friends and community integration, then that needs to be written into the transition program. James will make friends. It has to be written into the program, or it's not going to happen. No one's going to be addressing it. The next piece is facts. What are James' friendship skills right now? How are his social skills? How about not just for friends, but for coworkers? So you have to assess where the person's at and work on social and friendship skills actively during high school. And the problem, which is foremost in my mind, is that people on the diploma track are fast-tracked out of school once they have their academic credits, and these types of things are not thought about. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're having the poor outcomes, is that we're not assessing all areas of need and we're not addressing them. So now that we know what the outcomes are for social, it motivates us and gives us a factual basis for making this a priority, because that is not quality of life to be sitting on the sofa for 2-3 years with no social contact or very limited social contact till we figure out, what should we be doing instead? And we want to take that burden off of parents who don't know the answers to these questions, because it should be figured out by the transition team. Is the person going to volunteer at an animal shelter after they leave school? Great. Let's start while they're still in school so we can troubleshoot and facilitate. And, if we know what the goal is, we can work on it sooner. So that's why talking about the outcomes gives us a vision of what we need to address and what we need to do differently. So that was the social disconnect. And the next one is independent living. So they were comparing young 20s people with autism and found out that only 2 out of 10 had ever lived independently from their parents. And if you look at other young 20s, it's like 100% have lived independently from their parents at some point. I'm just guessing, you know what I mean? Just from. But there is an expectation that many people with autism will just continue living with their families forever. And so when they go to the IEP table for the transition meeting, they ask, where is the person going to live? And if the parent says, with me, then there's no obligation for the transition plan to address independent living skills, unless you say, I want my son or daughter to have an independent life, and eventually they will live elsewhere, and we need to prepare them for that day. Independent living skills may not be addressed in the transition plan. Of course, they have to be, because even if you're going to go to college or whatever else you're going to do, you need independent living skills. Everybody needs to be as independent as possible. Even if the ultimate goal is interdependence, everyone needs to work on time management, money management, organization skills, all that executive functioning stuff. And if people stay in high school till they're 22 and get a certificate, they spend a lot of time working on independent living skills. But if you are going to get a diploma, there's no time because of your academic load, so you leave school without the skills for independent living. And it is a big source of failure for people who have good potential but aren't organized. Or, for example, I know a guy very bright man on the spectrum, who graduated from high school and went to college, and his mom checked in how things are going, and she said, well, what are the bathrooms like? This is like 2 weeks into college. And he says, I don't know. She says, what do you mean you don't know what the showers are like? And he said, I haven't taken a shower in the dorm yet.
Oh, my gosh.
And she said, why not? And he said, because nobody told me I stink. Because at home, he would walk through the room, she would say, you stink, go take a shower. And he would go take a shower. And he was so dependent on that prompt, when no one told him he stinks at college, he didn't know to shower himself. Yet this is a man who can do science at an unbelievable level. So where did the system fail him? That they did not prepare him with understanding how to take care of himself because he was on the diploma track. So that's just one example that shows us, what's really important in life for making it through. And there's a doctor named Laura Klinger at Teach in North Carolina. And about 40 years ago, she was a behavioral therapist in the Teach program, which is, one of the most outstanding autism programs in the country. She's now back as the clinical director. And she realized that she has a gold mine of information about the people who went through the Teach program and what their lives are like as adults. And she went back and thought, what will be the predictor of success for people with autism when they're adults? Is it going to be their intellect? Is it going to be their verbal ability? And when she did her preliminary research, she found that the predictive factor for success in life is independent living skills. That was the answer that made the difference between people who were successful and people who were still struggling as adults. That's a big deal. And we are not giving enough focus to that in transition programs, particularly for people who are on the diploma track. So does that make sense, that that's something we can do differently?
It makes perfect sense. And it also sounds to me like this transition plan that is part of the IEP process when a young person with special needs is going through high school, that this is a tool that is, it sounds to me like it's very often underutilized or even ignored by both parent and teacher alike. Parent probably more so out of ignorance as to how to use the tool, and from the administrative side, probably because, again, they're so focused on the academics and on just getting the child, through the system and out, that this tool that should have things included in it that we as neurotypical people might take for granted, like making friends or learning about personal hygiene or focusing on after-school programs or focusing on extracurricular activities that will inure to the child's eventual career goal or whatever that may be, should all be included and specifically stated in that transition plan in order to facilitate and in fact mandate the school's participation in preparing the child for those things. So it sounds to me like the importance of using that tool cannot be emphasized and stressed enough, as well as perhaps if the child is also a client of here in California of the regional centers, that they they address with their coordinator or whoever it is at the regional center, making sure that the child does have the support to learn the independent living skills that they need, and the other support services that can be available to them to prepare them for graduation or for this transition and for moving on in life and becoming as independent as they possibly can be, because I agree with you. I think that should be everyone's goal.
Well, here's the thing. The transition plan by law can address future education, future work, and independent living. Those are the three things that are supposed to be addressed in the transition plan. So they ask you, what are the goals for work that we should be working towards in transition? And you give an answer. Say, he will work or she will work. You have to say it. Then they'll say, well, what about future education? She will continue learning. He will continue learning. What about independent living? If the parent says, he is staying home with us, there will be no goal in that area, nothing to drive the transition plan in the area of independent living. So you say, he will live independently, she will live independently. Don't put a timeline on it, but that is the goal, that after high school there will be this independent living in some form. So that's where parents are shutting it down unknowingly by saying, oh, we don't need to work on that. He's staying home with me. He's going to continue living with us. But you want to say is a bigger vision that someday they will live independently, even with supports, but, more independently than in the parental home, because you shut that door if you don't have that as part of your vision. You shut the door on all those services, all that teaching, and all that learning as part of the high school program. And the reason the regional center won't pick that up in California until the person does leave school is because it is the obligation of the school to work on independent living skills for those who need it. And Laura Klinger proved something to us. Every person needs it, not just people who aren't getting a diploma. Everybody on the spectrum needs independent living skills because that was the predictor of success. But not everybody is getting independent living skills.
I couldn't agree with you more. Just from my own experience with my own son, who is a person with special needs, as well as examples that I've seen in other young people, I could not agree with you and with Laura Klinger more. Independent living skills are absolutely crucial, just as crucial as the academics and the social skills, and it's all a part of the big puzzle.
It is.
And again, all things that, we as parents very innocently might either take for granted or might short circuit unknowingly because we're not aware of these things that need to be stated and need to be said and need to be looked at for the future.
And then you would look at the person's current level of independent living skills. What do they know how to do, and what do they need to learn? Can they manage money, even if it's using an app now instead of traditional bank account? Can they organize their time? Can they keep appointments? Can they make appointments? And this is an area where parents can begin as soon as you can, give your children responsibility and believe that they're capable of contributing to the household and the community, and give them opportunities to learn skills. So, for example, your kid's 14. Teach them how to do laundry. Start by sorting whites and colors. Then teach them how to use the machines, and then give them that job to take over the family laundry care. Give them responsibilities, because it is so good for their self-esteem, for one thing, that they are contributing, that they are capable. And, a lot of people are capable of doing these things, and we tend to baby our young people with disabilities or special needs, thinking they can't do it. Well, that's something that's going to come true. If you believe they can't do it, then they're not going to be able to, because you're not going to work on those skills. So in our house, Tom was good with numbers, so he pays the bills every month, and he started doing it when he was about 15. And so he's been paying bills for years now. And so when he did get his own place when he was 26, he had lots of skills that, he had practiced at home, but he also had explicit teaching for independent living skills. and it made a world of difference. And he also had supervision at first when he was living independently. So it's not like we're not saying alone, and we're not saying suddenly. We're saying gradually and with support to the extent needed till the person is as independent as they can be. And some people,
right, and that's the caveat, as independent as they can be. There may be some people that are able to achieve complete independence, and there may be some people who will always need some level of support. But either way, that's fine. The key is as independent as they can be.
Yes, and don't underestimate their abilities, and don't be afraid to give them responsibility, because you're doing them a favor. But do it in a respectful way that is commensurate with their support needs. And you bring that point up about support needs. The idea is that if a person's support needs in high school and adult life should be pretty similar. So if someone has a lot of support in their high school life, whether they're getting a certificate or not, then you have to figure, okay, how do we replace that aide who's with them all day? What's that going to look like in adult life? Who's going to be with them in their adult life? And that's what the transition plan is supposed to do. It's supposed to create an equally valid or equally supported life as what they had in high school. And it takes a lot of work to find the agencies and the services and all that. And that is what's supposed to happen in transition. It's supposed to connect you to your local resources that provide adult services. And do you think that's happening?
By your laugh, I can tell. No, the answer is no.
Some places are doing a great job, and some places are producing a services cliff. So there we have it again. It's all about recognizing these areas to focus on, and not assuming that once they leave school, people can figure it out, because the transition plan is about figuring it out before they leave school.
Right.
And making those connections.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't gone over yet? And also, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners to remember from this conversation?
Well, that we have to understand transition better and do a better job for people. And one area that people can focus on that is a huge predictor of adult success is employment, working during high school. That's a huge factor, and there's now funding for it from the Department of Rehabilitation across the country, that now people with disabilities age 14 and up can get support for paid work while they're in high school, and internships and unpaid work, because what you learn through work is incredible, and it's a supported work during high school. So it's a fantastic opportunity to work on organizational skills, social skills, find out what you're good at, find your passion. So employment is another huge area to focus on, because the adult goal for everyone is to work, to have something to do, to be productive, maybe even get paid. Isn't that everyone else's goal? So why should we have less of a goal for people with disabilities? But
absolutely.
Yeah. So the other takeaway points would be, you know your child best, but this area is the scariest, where you feel the least secure. Maybe you've gotten good at regular IEPs. So, learn as much as you can about transition. Find some parents who know. Hire a professional advocate to have the best possible transition plan, so that you can have better results.
Well, Emily, tell me then, how can our listeners reach you or reach out to you if they have questions or they want to know more?
Sure. Well, my website is my name, Emily Iland, and that is spelled ILAND, EmilyIland.com. And our book, Come to Life, is available at Tom's website, which is thomasisland.com. And that gives a lot of information about how parents and teachers can work with students to discover certain things about themselves, what they like, what they want, what they're good at, what they still need to learn, where their passion is, and to help them find their voice to become self-advocates in this process of transition. It is when we turn the reins over to the student themselves and listen to their voice. So, but we can't just do it because it's time. We have to prepare them and help them get ready to be more active in creating a more authentic adult life for themselves. So that's our book, Come to Life, Your Guide to Self-Discovery, and it's available at thomasiland.com.
And do you want to spell that just in case people aren't sure how to spell Thomas or
Sure.
Iland?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry.
THOMASILAND.com.
And your website is EmilyIland.com. And Emily, go ahead and spell that too, because people have all different spellings for names nowadays.
No problem. EmilyIland.com.
Okay, and is there also a contact form on there just in case they do have any questions?
Yes, there is a contact form, and it links all of my projects. It has Be Safe, it has Experience Autism, it has my work in the Latino community, our work on Come to Life. We do workshops on these things, and we travel all over the country doing it, and it's very exciting work. It's kind of groundbreaking. I didn't mention safety as an essential area to address in transition that's being totally neglected. All kinds of safety is being neglected. So interacting with the police is a big one, and that's what Be Safe is all about. And we actually have a movie and curriculum that parents and teachers can buy at the website besafethemovie.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for your time and the incredibly helpful information that you've shared today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, I'm always looking for solutions and for people to work together to, help the people we care about have a better life.
Thank you again for being here with us, and I also want to thank our listeners for spending a part of their day with us. I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.